After 9 years, The Last Guardian is finally complete. It's a game we can all now experience for ourselves after many no-shows at trade events and reported issues during development. Created by Sony Interactive Entertainment's Japan studio and Gen Design, the game has had a notoriously rough path to launch, and the end result is well worth the wait. But when it was announced as a PS3 project all the way back in 2007, little did we know we'd actually end up playing it on one of two consoles, its successor the PS4 and of course the PS4 Pro. It's Tom here with Digital Foundry, and today I'm giving you an overview of what to expect from The Last Guardian, both in frame rate and resolution depending on which machine you use. I can confirm right away the game does have full PS4 Pro support on day one, which you can see running here in its 4K mode. If you have the newer Pro model you can rest easy, there's no mention of it in the day one patch notes, but you're very much covered. One thing this 1GB patch does mention is the addition of high dynamic range support, something the game puts to great use regardless of PS4 model. Going in there, the question is simple: does the standard PS4 hand in a great experience, or is there an argument for playing it for the first time on a PS4 Pro? Let's talk visuals first. On the standard PS4 you get a native 1920 by 1080 resolution, giving a far crisper image than we could have ever expected from PS3. There'll be more on frame rates later, but even playing on a regular PS4, the turnout is easily one of the most visually arresting games on the machine to date. At the heart of the production is Trico, of course, a huge creature of many moving parts. Despite the dense feathers covering its body, when placed against the game's lighting, Trico has a nearly Pixar-esque quality in motion. Dithering and rough edges are surprisingly minimal, and combined with a high quality motion blur, it's often hard to tell when a cutscene has ended. The same goes for materials across the game. Geometry and textures are on the simplistic side, but because of the way all these elements are lit, indoors or out, the result is photogenic and natural. There are blemishes that show The Last Guardian's history as a PS3 developed title, and texture resolution is one of them, which is lower resolution than we'd expect of a current gen game with a huge pool of GDDR5 RAM. The often thorough post-process anti-aliasing doesn't address all these shimmer either, and despite Trico's complex design blending nicely with the environment, foliage elements still flicker as you pan the camera past. Even so, the final picture comes together beautifully in The Last Guardian, with strong art direction that keeps each area visually distinct from the last. That's the standard PS4, but what about PS4 Pro? Well, if you boot the game up with 4K selected in the console's front end settings, The Last Guardian renders all this at a higher resolution. We've pinned it down to a native 1890p or 1900p, which would be 3380 by 1900. Either way, it's a considerable boost in pixel count over 1080p on the base PS4, and one that scales well to Ultra HD TVs, especially with HDR enabled. The only shortfall is it still doesn't quite eliminate all visual noise on the foliage we mentioned earlier, but everything else looks incredibly pristine on a 4K set. In terms of graphic settings, the effects, textures and lighting for example, there aren't any distinguishable differences from the regular PS4 here. It's fundamentally the same game, but the move to 1900p only enhances the game's filmic look. But here's the twist: on PS4 Pro you have two rendering modes you can choose from, depending on what resolution you select before the game starts. To be clear, The Last Guardian has no in-game options at all for this, for resolution or HDR. But by selecting either 1080p or 4K from PS4 Pro's front-end video settings, you can alter the game's visual quality and crucially the frame rate as well. So for example, if you select 4K as your output, you get a native 1900p from the game. However, performance does struggle in this mode. On the other hand, choose the 1080p mode and you get exactly that when booting the game, a native 1080p. This second option gives you an image that matches the standard PS4 exactly, at this very same resolution, but the advantage is PS4 Pro reallocates its resources in 1080p mode by simply making it run at a much smoother frame rate than is possible otherwise. Check out this performance analysis. On the left is a standard PS4 test, in the middle is PS4 Pro running at 1080p, and on the right is PS4 Pro set to its 4K mode, which is of course 1900p in reality. The gist is the only option out of the three to give you a regularly smooth 30fps is the middle one, PS4 Pro running in 1080p. If you're on a regular PS4, you're in for a very variable experience, lurching between 20 to 30 FPS just by running around empty areas, and with stutters to over 110 milliseconds. All playthroughs have full VSync and there are thankfully no frame pacing issues at 30 FPS here, but playing The Last Guardian on a standard PS4 easily gives the worst performance of all three options. Meanwhile, PS4 Pro owners have a choice to make. Running in that 4K mode is smoother compared to regular hardware overall, but there are still glaring drops. Note the red line here. You get a more consistent 30 FPS in spots, while in others it's almost neck and neck with the base PS4 running at 1080p. Worryingly, PS4 Pro at 4K can actually add frame rate drops of its own, such as the earlier lake sequence where we're swimming. One theory is the water reflections here take a toll on GPU bandwidth more when combined with PS4 Pro's higher native resolution. It's certainly not ideal to have prolonged drops like this, and in other cases too, where there were none on original hardware. But across the course of play, you'll generally get a smoother frame rate on PS4 Pro at 4K compared to base PS4 hardware, but in many cases only just. For those wanting the smoothest experience with barely any drops from the first 2 hours of play, you've got to play on PS4 Pro in 1080p. There are some single frame drops down the line, but it's a night and day difference compared to the other two options. To be absolutely clear, you must boot the game with this option selected to see any frame rate gains like this, to force it to run in native 1080p. The end result is a vastly smoother one at 30 FPS, and an interesting option to have on the hardware for those without 4K TVs. Overall, it's no surprise that the best way to play The Last Guardian is on PS4 Pro, but a shame that the original PS4 struggles as much as it does. After such a long stretch of development, PS4 Pro comes across as the only machine capable of delivering the ideal experience. Whether that's in aid of a solid 30 FPS or boosting image quality for 4K displays, its higher specs are seemingly a better fit for the game's ambitions. It often leaves the standard console trailing behind, and personally there's no doubt in my mind that I'd rather play this on PS4 Pro in 1080p mode. At its core though, The Last Guardian is a compelling ride. There's a quality game behind these technical points regardless of which hardware you're using, but for this one the pecking order is very clear. So after 9 years, the wait is over. It really speaks to the quality of The Last Guardian's art direction that its visuals hold up as well as it does on current gen consoles, and I have to wonder what's next from the original creators at Gen Design now they've finally shipped the game. Anyway, if you found this technical overview useful, feel free to like and subscribe to support what we do. Also, you're welcome to check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net to see this analysis exactly as we intended before uploading to YouTube. But until next time, thanks for watching.